Welcome to the 10th episode of the Animal Riot podcast, brought to you by Animal Riot Press, a literary press for books that matter. It's your producer, Katie, here, and this episode has been edited to reflect our new name. If you're new to the Animal Riot community, welcome, and you can find out more about us at animalriotpress.com. Now on to the episode with your host, Brian Birnbaum, and today's guests, Devin Kelly, George Sawaya, and Jared Marcel Pollen.
I'm your host, Brian Birnbaum. We're here today with the OG Sarah Lawrence gang, Devin Kelly, poet and prose writer and co-host of the reading series, George Sawaya, poet and co-author of A Good Leave with Devin Kelly, and Jared Pollen, fiction and nonfiction writer and author of Unified Field of Loneliness, which is coming out with Crow's Nest, a short story collection due out in March 15th, right, Jared? Am I correct about that?
That is correct.
March 15th, good. Okay. This hour's brand of fuckery is brought to you by two lovely GABA B agonists, phenibut and alcohol, the former of which probably no one knows about, but it's, go look it up. You fucking
Phenibut?
Yeah, phenibut. I think it's like phenibut or something, but like kind of like kratom. Like I'm not gonna say kratom or like kratom. I'm just gonna keep saying kratom.
Fitbit, yeah, whatever. Who gives a shit?
Let's just call it Fitbit. But yeah, I'm fucking tore up from the floor up on this. No, I'm not. I just took a little bit, but I really just like can't stop eating. But anyway,
Good to know.
It's like, yeah, seriously, it's fucking gain season out here, man. All right, yeah. So today we're going to talk about kind of how tech and specifically big data is going to affect literature and art in the coming days. So Jared, why don't you talk about a little? We'll jump off with an article you came up with about House of Cards and how they came up with that. Netflix in particular.
We live right now?
Yeah, we are.
Okay, sorry.
It's all good. We'll cut that.
I just went to refill my drink, and when I came back, you said March 15th, right? And I said yeah, and then we're recording now.
Good, dude. Good fucking timing. Actually, I think we'll keep all of this.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Well, this is something that I learned. I stumbled upon it like a couple weeks ago. It was really startling, actually, which is that Netflix did a big data analysis when they were preparing to launch their flagship show, because House of Cards is really what made Netflix. I mean, before that, it was just like a, mediocre streaming service with like bad quality and no original content. And Netflix invested a huge amount of their money in House of Cards. They invested like 50% of their budget into House of Cards. Damn. It was a huge gamble. And
I did not know this.
Yeah, and they analyzed viewer data from the British House of Cards. And they discovered that people who liked the British House of Cards were also watching a lot of movies with Kevin Spacey, and they were also watching a lot of David Fincher films. Huh. And so, of course, David Fincher is an executive producer on House of Cards, and then they cast Kevin Spacey for it. And they constructed the show based on, like, consumer data, viewer data in that way. And they built that thing like a fucking Big Mac. They built it to be as good as it could possibly be. Jesus. And it worked. I mean, House of Cards is massively entertaining.
Yeah,
it makes me wonder if the Big Mac was built on data.
Ask Ray Kroc, man.
Yeah.
That's absolutely nuts. And it's actually funny because the first podcast we ever did was on Sapiens, like very loosely, obviously. We were more just drinking. But I just picked up Harari's latest one, and I had read Homo Deus since, or maybe even before that podcast. Yeah, he's talking about big data a lot and how decisions will be made for us. And this is kind of, this is a harbinger of how we will be force-fed art in a certain way. And it's kind of, what's scary about it is that the show's fucking good.
Yeah.
I guess my view on it is I'm less afraid of decisions being made for us than art being taken out of the hands of artists,
of creators.
Yeah, because we've already seen a lot of programs that are making music that's indecipherable or judged as superior to, like, actual classical composers and stuff, Yeah. And of course we already have programs out there that can beat any chess player out there.
Yeah. The role of the algorithm in art.
Yeah. So I don't know, thoughts. What are our fears and hopes and dreams, guys?
I mean, like, what's the the best case scenario for it, if we want to get imaginative, right, is that suddenly by algorithm alone, anybody can make anything beautiful or like touching or entertaining. I'm afraid I don't see the downside of it, honestly. It just, who knows? What would the role of art be in that society when you can push a button and make compelling instances of it?
Sure. I mean, well, to me too, though, art doesn't exist as much as we would perhaps at times like for it to exist in this way. I do not think it exists in a vacuum. And so therefore, if we live in a world where a great deal of art is made in response to or as a result of, say, data pulling people's interests and pulling their wants and needs, we also are most likely living in a world where everything else is doing that as well, where we are eating and exercising and voting in a world where all these things are sort of aggregates of pulling data based on our wants and needs. Therefore, if art is doing that in a world where everything else is doing that, then what is the value of art? If art is, art should be running counter or should be running in at least tangentially or critiquing, glancing off the mainstream. In a world of big data, art to me is becoming the mainstream. And that is more dangerous to me, I don't know, maybe than it seems.
Yeah, I agree that it's dangerous. I don't know if it's that dangerous in the field of art. I think there are going to be symptoms within it, because the fear is that, this is so vast. It's hard to know where to start. But one of my biggest fears is that if choice is what makes art, both from the artist's perspective and the consumer's perspective, then what happens when an algorithm knows better than we do? And so what happens when everyone else is being fed their own preferences and they become so for example, let's take one example. And I think, and Harari kind of touches on this in his book, but what happens when we're being tailored our own pieces of art that no one else has access to? Like, let's say an algorithm comes up with a song, right? That's like, oh, this is the song that it takes some biometric data or something. And it sees what's going on with you. And you have some compositional program that just writes this song or melody or ambient noise for you. And then you just don't share it with anyone else. And that kind of destroys art in the sense of breaking down that solipsism, that's one of my biggest fears. But at the same time, I mean that, like George said, obviously that's better for the consumer, for the individual, but does that distance us from each other?
So you're talking about,
well, it makes art. Yeah, it makes art less negotiable. It makes it less communal.
Right.
It's going to make it more hermetic, but that already happened once with the transition from oral culture to print culture. I mean, prior to the printing press, all art was social in the sense that if you wanted to see a play, you had to go out to the theater with everyone else and experience it with everyone else. But once the printed bound book was invented, you could sit in your home and consume endless volumes of books without any kind of social experience. And I'm sure that there were some people alive at that time who thought that was in violation of some kind of essential human communal experience of art. So it simply could be another iteration of that phenomenon.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Well, I agree, but I would also add to that. I think when that started, just to do some hypertextual critique of what you said, Jared, you probably weren't consuming endless amounts of books. You're probably consuming one book every blah, blah, blah amount of every week or every 2 weeks or every month or every year, based on the slowness of production and also your ability to access that production. What's interesting now is I believe the average human being in the Western world spends roughly 3 hours a day on their phone. I believe the latest statistic, just to use one app, is Instagram. I think the average person who has Instagram spends 32 minutes a day on Instagram. And I would assume that person is scrolling through at least 100 photos in those 32 minutes, which means that they're then spending, 20 seconds per photo. And so we have access to so many things we can consume now, and yet we're spending so little time on each thing we're consuming, and we're in our sort of siloed spaces, like the silo that forms around a human being holding a phone. And so, to me, it throws a deeper wrench into the conundrum of, like, we are so much easier to get. We are. Data is accumulating on us when we don't even know about it, and we're also accessing things in not that much depth. I don't know. It's just some wrenches, throwing wrenches. Everyone's getting hurt.
George, you wanted to say something. I cut you off. Sorry.
Oh no, just to go back to that idea that Brian raised about art as the sort of communal experience, which I think is definitely one of its functions, right? Art isn't just experienced on the individual level; it's a shared community experience, right? We all talk about the newest and best television shows. We all talk about the newest albums. We like to share art because it helps us sort of maintain our solidarity within the culture, which I think is a wonderful function of art, and one that could be potentially damaged if we are talking about some kind of incredibly perfect system that can just churn out individually perfect instances of art for a single consumer. I think that would be lost. Perhaps that is a detriment of that fantasy that we're discussing.
But one silver lining, I think, is that I honestly do think that the written word will be one of the last bastions of art that's protected from big data, because I don't really know. It is hard for me to. I can see an algorithm taking biometric data and like stuff like that and like creating a song, right? But creating language and like a story, I don't know what kind of data you'd have to pull for that.
Have you seen those? They often appear on Twitter. There are like algorithms that they force a robot to watch an entire season of Seinfeld, and then they ask the robot to reproduce that, like to on a script to write its own episode of Seinfeld, and they're hilarious.
Yeah, like hilariously bad. Or
no,
they
work.
Are you serious?
It's really scary. It's both really funny and really scary. It catches like.
Damn.
I saw one with Seinfeld, and it caught perfectly like the sort of ennui that is prevalent, like the fact that the robot like was able to capture that sense of ennui. That to me defines Seinfeld's humor.
God, I'm just like I'm like dying to jump into this free will conversation now, just because of this, like, because of that pattern recognition is just like so. But one thing I do want to mention is that Devin, I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, but I don't think George or Jared are. Keaton Patty, is it? I think that am I pronouncing that right? They're on Twitter, and I think they is the correct pronoun, right? Yeah, former SNL writer. They wrote this like faux Hallmark script. They said like I got a bot to watch 1 billion hours of Hallmark movies and wrote this script, and it's like one of the funniest things I've ever read in my life. Kind of a tangent, not an actual algorithm, but I highly recommend anyone check that out.
Well, okay, so there's something kind of analogous here. So we all know like that old chestnut of like 1,000 monkeys working at 1,000 typewriters, right?
Well, yeah, that's our closer. So yeah,
right. And so if enough chimps bang away at the keys for long enough, just by virtue of like chaos theory, they will at some point one of them produce a masterpiece. But that's completely random. We're in a situation now where we have highly intelligent machines run by algorithms who are not doing this randomly. They're sorting according to preference and according to certain features and certain structures, and they can produce, one bot can produce potentially like 1,000 masterpieces in 3 hours. If we're dealing with a super intelligent computer, right? We could be pumping out masterpieces daily, in huge quantities. Imagine what that would be like.
Yeah, it's gonna make good music look like dog shit.
Yeah.
And that was actually a Kanye West reference, not a...
Yeah, I got it.
But again, the question is, like, is a society with more masterpieces, like, is it lesser for its additional masterpieces?
No, definitely, that's not the fear. I don't think the fear is... The quality would... That's unquestionably going to we'll benefit from the quality aspect. That's not under question. It's what's going to happen to us. Like, it's kind of like, if you extrapolate the automation factor of like us becoming irrelevant as like laborers, what happens when we become irrelevant as artists and we just become these consumers that just like sit here and have things made for us. And I'm sure it would be deeply enjoyable in so many ways, but it's very hard to suss out the consequences of it, and we won't know until it happens.
Well, and I don't think the outcome of a algorithmically produced artistic world would be a bunch of high quality masterpieces. I think it would be in tune with the market, and I think what you would essentially
that's a fear. I think.
Yeah, I think the fear is that you would actually get
what's going to sell to more people.
You would get just a mass onslaught of essentially your versions of your Hollywood blockbusters in literary form or musical form, which we sort of already have with pop music. Movies. And then the question becomes, and then like our analysis of artistic merit is like within the concept of the blockbuster. Like Black Panther was ostensibly a blockbuster, but people have ascribed to it. It got nominated for Best Picture,
which is amazing.
Yeah, it's wild to me. And like I can go through a list in my head of summer blockbuster movies and tell you which ones I think were better. And usually my ability to tell you which things are better or my perception is grounded in like the things they do that are artistic. Like if a blockbuster does one crazy plot twist or has a character who is deeply complex or nuanced, but those things are truly like they're so rare that we learn like we don't. What makes a good blockbuster is usually like we have to ignore so much of the thing that makes it a mass-produced piece of garbage.
Right. Well, it's because we know the way those films are constructed. They're constructed based on market data, and they're designed not to fail.
Yeah.
Because there's so much at stake. And yeah, maybe talking about like, thousands of masterpieces being produced every day is not the best form of scaremongering. But I think what you said, Devin, is more likely. I think that's true. What's more likely is that it will reduce itself to like perfect formula.
Yeah. Well, like look what's happened to Netflix since House of Cards. You go on Netflix now and it's like when House of Cards came out, I believe it was there were 2 or 3 Netflix produced shows. One was House of Cards and one was Orange is the New Black. I could be wrong. And now
that's amazing.
Yeah.
So not that long ago.
And that was like
2011 or something?
2013, I think.
6 years ago.
It's incredible.
And now you go on Netflix and they have, it's also because their budget is huge and a Netflix produced show is just, I would assume, something they've bought the rights to or whatever, the distribution rights to. But now you go on Netflix and like there's a whole fucking slideshow of the Netflix originals and it goes on for infinity. And there's some that just pop up every week as if they're, truly a dime a dozen.
Yeah. No, that's a very, very, very good point, and it makes me think of, one of the, the bigger fears with big data, obviously for me at least, come politically. But drawing from that, it's like once politics and like people in charge have the keys to the algorithms, the fear to me is like, what can you use art for in that sense? Like, are we going back to some Soviet propaganda sort of like, the lyric, like subliminal shit? I don't know. I mean, that might be a little too alarmist, but it's a real fear to me, because like if a politician has the keys to this and they say, and you're coordinating the entire grid, like everything is connected together. So basically your health, your psychology, like everything, then I mean that can get a little scary about like what art is being filtered through the system, Yeah. I don't know. That was a little bit of a leap, but I think it's true.
No. I mean that is very true. There's a whole school of neo-Marxist criticism dedicated to that. I mean that's the culture industry. That's the idea that like in a capitalist society everything is destined to become pop. Everything is destined to become formulaic and hypnotizing. There's a whole school of Marxist theory dedicated to that very concept, which is that like in a market-driven, capital-driven society, any art that is produced will inevitably be driven by a profit motive, and reduce itself to a formula that serves the consumer foremost and the human being second, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that agenda will inevitably produce a kind of like stupefying, hypnotizing effect that makes us susceptible to fascism.
or at the least, like lowest common denominator, like hedging kind of stuff.
Yeah, the word to me is less politics and more the fact that all of this is in the hands of massive billionaires who can control politics. And as the Cambridge Analytica breach showed with Brexit, and I would assume with our recent election, already does control politics to a degree. Like Brexit happened in large part because people got their hands on data that suggested that like a large swath of voters, potential voters who never really voted, shared the same opinions. And if you could get that giant swath of voters to vote in one direction, then they could sway an entire election. Yeah. But that data didn't come from politicians. It was fed to politicians by people with moneyed interests. And that's, that's the worry. The deeper worry to me is that we live in a world where like everything we do is controlled by people so far outside the picture we don't even know who they are.
Yeah.
Well, one of the most effective things about the Cambridge Analytica thing is that they were able to target people individually, not just in swathes, but they were able to create psychological profiles of individuals and target them directly in the ways that they were most susceptible to.
Yeah, like on Facebook.
They were able to tell the best way for you to be deceived.
Yep.
And with regard to art, this goes back to what you were saying a little while ago, Devin, that like one respect in which the transition from oral culture to print culture is not analogous is that even in print culture, everybody was reading the same books.
Yeah.
But, imagine if we're in a culture where like we're all reading our own novels constructed for us based on our psychological profiles. And like, there's no shared experience. Like none of us have read the same things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, obviously they could you could make a preference where it's like, okay, well, please give me like a 10%, 20% randomized experience,
Yeah.
But whether they allow that or like it is allowed, that's another question. We won't
How much
know.
randomness would you like?
Yeah. Right. And also just going back to what you were saying about everything in capitalism being ultimately, pop, right? Like right now, the existential risk to not make pop and to make more obscure or like art like more literary or more more artful music whatever that means, right? The existential risk is just not that high. You maybe make less money, right? Well, if I have a day job, who gives a shit? But if the existential risk goes way higher because if you make this, you're not going to make any money, or maybe it's not allowed or something. That's when it becomes a big problem, because if people have the keys to big data and they can lock you out, that's where it gets a little scary. I'm not exactly sure how that would happen, but I'm sure it could, with the technology available to us. Certainly in the future.
But I mean, when we talk about the relationship that like pop art has with sort of more mass, well, I should say, sort of more artistic endeavors, idiosyncratic endeavors, like the pop and the idiosyncratic, the artful, sort of all. I mean, they react to one another in a lot of different ways. It is the job of the subversive attempt to sort of take the piss out of the popular. So, I mean, inevitably, as goes one, so goes the other. I see no reason why that shouldn't be especially true if most of the world's shared entertainment is being produced by a computer instead of a room full of people. I think they're still going to find their way to a different kind of narrative, a different sort of aesthetic. I think humans are I think at a certain point we just want to resist what's popular and see if there's not something better. Right? Isn't that, I think, a shared human frustration with the chafing popularity of certain things?
Yeah. Well, there's sorry.
No, I was just going to bring a real quick point. I don't know if you guys have heard of Hassan Minhaj. Yeah. His show's really good.
The Patriarch show,
I mean, I kind of have like a little preference for him because he makes like constant NBA references and like really like kind of like jockey like like early like aughts like references that I like really relate to. He's super smart and he's hilarious. But he just did his recent episode on China. That's kind of like a counter to what you're saying, George, like in terms of like that all sounds well and good, but that's us in our American culture in a quote unquote so-called, like free country. But if China all of a sudden becomes the superpower and, we keep globalizing, which is the message that they're sending because they want to globalize. Because they have so much, going for them right now. And if they are able to keep kind of annexing culture, that becomes scary to me. But to your point, in that episode, the way that women are handling the Me Too movement over there is amazing. The way they're getting around the censors, they basically forced Xi Jinping's hand to like acknowledge discrimination against women by basically getting around the censors by using words that like Chinese words that made Me Too, but they would use emojis that were like, basically like whatever me means in Chinese, they would use the whatever, like if it's a fucking, I think it was some like cartoon character, and it became this like symbol of like the Me Too movement because me meant like that or something. Yeah. I'm butchering this, but yeah, no, that's a really good point, but it's still really up in the air to me. And
right. Well, that's like in 1984 when Winston Smith writes "Down with Big Brother" in his journal. They don't have any language for dissent in that society. The only word he has is down, but he somehow manages to express that thought even with like limited capacity.
Right. Yeah. Super interesting.
Yeah. Which is in itself an artistic quality to be able to express.
It's like defamiliarization.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Exactly. I think maybe that's where the distinction is to be found actually in the ability to do that. But a potentially even more terrifying scenario is not a world in which everything becomes pop by virtue of the fact that everything's being constructed for us by, algorithms, but a world in which even a dissenting formula, a world in which like a kind of Banksy figure, even though I don't consider Banksy to be really that much of a rebel, but a sort of rebellious
shots
artist.
fired.
Yeah. What do you think? Comment below.
A world in which even like subversive art is also generated by algorithms, and it's designed to be like maximally irritating and agitating, against the mainstream. Yeah. Like, what do we do when even like this supposedly subversive stuff is being constructed? By intelligent bots,
and then it's subversively subversive in service of the mainstream,
and you get a sense of that. I think that to a large part that is dissent is now part of the equation, and I think we live in a world now where that is increasing. The Western world is increasingly, I think, moving toward a true binary between conservative and liberal, populist and anti-populist, whatever the fuck you want to call
populist
it.
And mainstream. I
guess,
like
I think we are moving. I think there are people who are definitely enjoying the fact that there are a lot of people upset about the current political culture, either, or that there are, like, it, just to put it like that, I would say that there are people who are really enjoying the fact that there are, 40+% of this country supports Donald Trump and the other rest of the country vehemently disagrees with him and are trying to push a culture where it's simply those two poles, because then I think you're easier to control.
Yes.
And I mean, like, that's, I don't know enough about liberal politics to get into to begin a discussion on that, but that's why like the upcoming Democratic primary race in America is something I am not looking forward to because it is going to be a race to me where no one knows how to talk about a truly better world without, like, you have to compromise. I feel like is a dirty word these days. Yeah. And I think compromise is, because compromise is anti-data. Mm-hmm. It is between 1 and 0. That's a scary thought to me.
Yeah. I feel a desperate pull to plug my new boy who just was on Joe Rogan the other day, Andrew Yang. I think he has some really good he has some really good ideas about like why Trump won that go a lot deeper than the standard, like,
sure,
tropes that we hear out there. But anyway, let's move past that.
I have an idea for something we should all share.
Yeah, let's do
sort
it.
of as like a it's like right when you write when you're in like 4th grade and you write a letter to your 8th grade self. I feel like we should go around and in 1 to 2 sentences only,
I love this.
describe what the perfect algorithmically tailored movie, sure, or novel-esque movie plot line would be for you. And then in 5 years, we can see if it's been delivered to us.
This is very hard.
In 1 to 2 sentences.
1 to 2 sentences.
And
like,
then-
like man comes to town, mystery man comes to town, gets shot, falls in love,
And then you have to
gets, hung, that kind of thing.
and then you
okay,
have
2 to 3 sentences,
and-
Jared.
and
But like
then you-
keep it to 45 seconds.
45. Damn, I can
30
I can-
seconds.
I can say a bunch of sentences, but then you have to lay out the algorithm afterwards.
Okay. Or like you have to hashtag it. Okay. Like hashtag violence. Hashtag deep-seated masculinity.
All right, you go first then.
Yeah.
I'm fucking terrified.
You want me to go first?
Yeah.
You have to explain it in a series of zeros and ones.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ta-
yeah, sure.
Tabs or no tabs?
I volunteered it. I'll go first. I'm gonna need 10 seconds to think. I have a. Great. Yeah. So my perfect movie novel would be.
Was it a book or a movie first?
Obviously, it's a book first. It's a novel It's a novel made for the movies. Young male with no mother and a deep-seated connection, unspoken connection to his father, wakes up one morning to find his father has been brutally murdered across the country and wanders fearlessly across the country by foot, looking to avenge the death of his father. Sleeps only in Motel 8s and falls in love with a desk clerk at a Motel 8 in Toledo, who then comes with him to avenge the death of his father. And he arrives to find his father buried in an unmarked grave and his father's killer pissing on the grave. And he is so overcome with grief that he cannot kill his father's murderer. And his now wife, they were married in Reno. His now wife takes the paper letter opener that he's been carrying for months from his pocket, from her now husband's pocket, and slices off the murderer's penis and then kills him, and that's how the novel ends.
Well, you just gave us the ending.
Yeah,
now.
but that to me is it.
That was also just like a 3-hour thing when you said like 30
Yeah.
seconds. But and also I just want to add that with the letter opener, he's only been eating McDonald's chicken nuggets and stabbing them with the letter opener and putting them in his mouth and forming little like Joker like cuts on the corner of his lips.
So hashtag violence, hashtag America, hashtag male vulnerability,
hashtag Bruce Willis,
and hashtag
Devin, that just sounds like one of your stories.
I know. Well, I think that's the aim here is that we realize it. But anyways,
that sounds like this. That sounds like the stuff that you produced in workshop.
Yeah, I have to go back to that. But why don't? Who's gonna pick it up next?
Shit. Do you guys want to go? I can go. I have nothing, but I'll just start going. All right. A big pharma exec gets hooked on a new research drug that proves an untapped portion of the brain is available to us that can transcend between the third and fourth dimension.
Oh my God, that's enough. I mean, like,
that's it.
Yeah,
that's it. I think that's it. Oh, right. Our producers are reminding me. I got
hashtags.
Yeah, hashtags. Hashtag I'm the plug. Hashtag drugs. Hashtag.
You got to hashtag big pharma.
Hashtag big pharma. Hashtag fuck Scott Gottlieb.
Yeah.
All right.
Hashtag Martin Shkreli.
So far, it does feel quite on brand.
Yeah. We don't even need bots, man. We could just do this all day.
Yeah.
All right, we're waiting, George or Jared.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Take it away, brother.
Go ahead, George.
Yeah. You want me to go first?
Yeah, sure.
Wait. So I need a refresher on what it is exactly that we're doing. Are we programming? Are we talking about like the perfect movie?
Your ideal masterpiece / entertainment. Like someone made the movie for you.
That's what I thought.
Or the novel for you.
Oh, and real quick, my algorithm is a binomial
Okay.
fraction over 0. So it doesn't really exist.
Got it.
Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, thanks for that, Brian.
Okay.
I think that's pretty easy. For me, I think that's going to have to be. I could probably do it with two sentences: Arnold Schwarzenegger and time travel. You can count me the fuck in if you've got Arnold Schwarzenegger traveling through time.
As the kindergarten
Yeah,
cop.
I don't care what he is, because he's the same guy in every movie. He's just the biceps.
It's a wormhole.
It helps if he's on Mars.
It's the biceps.
If you want to throw
Helps if he's on Mars.
Paul Verhoeven would be my choice for this. Basically, I just want a Total Recall 2.
Got it.
I've just been waiting for that sequel for the last.
Yeah, which explains
29
all of
years.
George's comments in this episode. Is he's deeply invested in just mainlining entertainment.
Yeah. Total. Just type in Total Recall 2, enter, run
No,
algorithm.
that's a great idea. Hashtag Total Recall 2. I want all of our listeners to get on Twitter and make this shit happen. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Let's do
Dude,
it.
the movement has begun.
Yeah, we've already got
Yeah.
one tweet.
Yeah. Hashtag Arnold Schwarzenegger.
If you like what you hear, hashtag Total Recall 2.
That's it. I think we can
Let's
do
start
it.
a movement.
Paul Verhoeven is still alive, isn't he? I think we can get him.
I don't know who the fuck that is. I'm going to look him up right
man.
now. Paul, how do you
Crocodile Dundee, man.
Yeah, man.
Oh, God.
Oh, no. You're thinking about
Wow.
Paul Hogan. I'm talking about Paul Verhoeven, who is the director of...
Who's that?
Oh, yeah, I was
He's
about
a
to
Dutch,
say.
he's a Dutch hyper-violent science fiction director,
Jared's already jumping.
shit.
Jared's already trying to mainstream this shit. Like,
I'm jumping to my answer.
how do we
I was
get?
gonna say.
Paul
How do we
Hogan
get all
is-
of Australia involved?
I'm just looking at photos of Paul Hogan.
Yeah, that hat, man. That's like
Yeah.
the Australia's version of the 10-gallon hat. I need that.
Amazing.
Also, Crocodile
All right,
Dundee
all right,
3.
well-
We'll take Crocodile Dundee 3, too. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, no, our producers are telling me that she wants both of your movies, Jared and George, to involve murdering Lars von Trier brutally
Oh god.
to
Gladly.
get exactly what he is asking for. Really, I mean, he's seriously just crying out for help.
Yeah.
He wants.
That'll
to
be the
murdered.
after credits.
Anyway, okay.
All right,
Jared,
Jared.
so I don't know. That could be your movie. I don't know. Go. What's your movie?
I just think we should keep. I think we should just keep remaking Back to the Future.
Oh
That's like
my
the perfect
god!
movie.
Oh god! I just went half chub a little bit.
Yeah. I'm surprised, Jared, that yours isn't more of a
The brow's not high enough, Devin.
Yeah. I mean, I know you have the capability to descend your brow quite low, but you also have the
He can
capability.
fur-
Brow
he-
stoops.
Yeah,
He can furrow the fuck out of that
your
thing.
forehead is just huge, and your eyes are below your nose. So your brow spectrum is quite vast, and I was
Just-
expecting the high end of your brow, not the lowest
Yeah.
end.
And just for
No, that's the nadir of my brow.
Okay. Well, that sentence in and of itself shows.
that's his movie,
Yeah.
The Nadir of My Brow.
Yeah.
That's fucking it right there.
It's just a pitch black movie, no characters, and just a garbled voice speaking in reverse through one of those.
Hashtag nothingness.
Yeah.
It's just me explaining how disappointed I am in everyone
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
an hour and a half.
Yeah, just for our listeners, just to let you know, Jared is basically the Canadian Morrissey. So
Yeah.
that's basically
Looks
who he
like
is.
him, talks like him.
Yeah,
is
everything.
him.
He is him, and it's the only time I've ever seen him dance is when we went to a Smith's. Not what was that? What was that? Our lovely
It was
producers.
like
Another night I was
was
not
like a-
there.
it
Was
was
it-
like a Morrissey dance night. They were playing the Smiths.
Some,
The
yeah, that's
day
just a
before
DJ.
Jared got fired.
That was.
Yeah, and I got fired the next day.
Yeah, that's right. You ran you ran the world's fastest drunk mile
Yeah.
and then got fired.
And now you're in Europe because you got fired.
Yeah, pretty much.
Defected, running from
No,
big
but
data.
they will. They do. Yeah, moving away from big data. No, but they do teach the Back to the Future script in like virtually every screenwriting 101
Yeah.
class because it is like the perfect script.
Yeah, well, it's a great example of I think what we were talking about before of a successful movie that tapped into something artistic at the same time.
Ish. I think so. Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. So
or
if
just
we
did
keep- if
did
we just keep
exactly what
going-
it said it was going to do, but did it quite well.
Yeah, it did. I mean, Back to the first Back to the Future is one of the greatest movies ever.
Agreed.
made.
Yeah. So if we just keep going back to the future, then
Yeah.
then that's it.
Yeah, I think that works. I don't know what that means, but I think that's actually the plot of my story somehow. I don't know. Yeah, I think we just need drugs. Anyway, yeah. So yeah, we were talking about big data, and we were talking about algorithmically making movies.
Yeah. Well, comment below with what your favorite movie
What your
would-
favorite movie
yeah,
is.
yeah.
George, do you want to talk about how you are aiding and abetting this system by constantly going to see every Avengers movie
Yeah,
that comes
absolutely.
out?
I'd be thrilled.
I knew you would.
So
I
here's
knew
the
you
thing:
would.
talking about subversive and popular, and how it goes around comes around, right? When I was a young man, this was subversive, right? Comic books were the things that the
that's
unpopular
true.
people enjoyed.
Yeah.
Genre,
What the fucking
right,
losers
genre
did.
fiction, anime. Now all of these things have come up so that I mean they've really dominated young adult culture now, and they pervade into adulthood, and they stay with us. And so I have
Sure.
no problem gushing about Marvel superheroes or Star Wars, which, if you ask me, is you know, it's never going to be the original trilogy, right? But the Marvel movies are making gangbusters, and here's the thing: they're pretty good. Like, I don't just eat any shit that's shoveled in the direction of my face hole. Like, I have some, like, I know the difference between shit. Is what I'm saying.
I know when to close my mouth.
Right?
Just turn your head,
Like,
man.
I'm not going to watch Captain America punch an alien with a shield made of imaginary metal because I need to understand like what I'm doing with my life, or you know, I want to come to terms with that loved one that I lost. You know, I'm going to watch him punch an alien in the face with a shield made out of imaginary metal because it's fucking crazy, and it's a hell of a lot of fun, right? That's great.
I think you just made me realize that Wu-Tang Clan is a metaphor for big data in the sense that they just sew our assholes shut and just keep feeding us.
Well, I think we should note here that amongst all of us, George is the most shamelessly commercial in his enjoyment of certain films.
Oh,
Oh
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
Top Gun. Let's talk about Top
Well,
Gun.
Top Gun is one of the best movies.
That's an
ever made.
algorithm movie right there.
Yeah.
that's like
That-
perfect. Just
and-
like Back to
and
the
they're making
Future.
another one.
And I think it's a
They
great,
don't know.
well, they've been in the works.
Wow. Is it going to be
I think they're
Tom?
finally doing it though.
Yeah, it's gonna be in 3D.
Tom and Val.
Yeah.
See, now with the algorithm Tom is gonna put in an algorithm
Yeah.
for like Scientology
Yeah,
subversion.
but what Top Gun shows, and I don't want to wax poetic here on Top Gun, but,
I do. I
But what
want you
it
to.
does show to me is that Top Gun was made pre big data, and I think they stumbled onto a formula, or they predicted a formula that worked, which is just like, again, as was it Scorsese or Tarantino who said it's like mainlining adrenaline. And they just said, like, let's get a bunch of hot dudes. Let's get some hot women. Let's put the dudes in things that go 400 miles an hour, or actually like 800 miles an hour.
way faster than that.
Let's put some explosions in, and let's call it a wrap, you know? And like, let's shove it all up through the orifice of the military industrial
sprinkling
complex.
of jingoism.
And come out on the side of the Cold War. Like, so the formula worked. And what's fascinating to me about Top Gun, and what I can never get over, is that same director directed Days of Thunder, which came out 2 years later, I think, which is essentially the same movie, except it takes place on the ground with NASCARs, which go 1/8 of the speed or 1/10 of the speed as a F-18.
Is it
or
Formula One?
No, it's just NASCAR.
It's just NASCAR.
And it's
Oh, yeah, you said
exactly the same plot. Like, Tom Cruise falls in love with a woman, also has a rivalry with someone. Everyone is wearing jumpsuits still.
And there's like some cigar,
Yeah.
like some cigar pinching coach who's just like, God damn it, like you're
Yeah.
so arrogant.
And
You know,
it's
like,
and it's so much worse than Top Gun, only by virtue that everyone who's seen Days of Thunder has seen Top Gun before and says, well, this is Top Gun, but it's on the ground. And so it shows the folly of it shows, I guess, to George's point, that if some algorithm was working, they would have said, okay, Top Gun works. What's the only way we can make it better? Oh, we have to put it in space.
Well,
Like,
speaking
we have to.
I was about to say, speaking of understanding that, like your contention is that the success of the film was not up to its plot, but to the relative speed of the activity they were undertaking. I think that's correct.
I mean, the plot's fine. The plot is great.
It felt inert.
Yeah, the plot is the same as any plot, which is just yeah, and the names too. I mean, you also can't go back to Earth because on Earth people go by their real names, and when you're flying fighter planes, you can be called Maverick, Hollywood, like the name Slider, Maverick, Hollywood, Iceman. Like Viper.
It sounds like a Marvel comic book movie when you talk about.
Yeah,
it
is.
It does.
Truly,
it does.
Yeah,
it does.
I mean, I love Top Gun unashamedly, and I will always love it. Goose. I mean, and Goose is what makes the movie.
Goose
How
died,
pissed off?
right?
How
Goose
pissed off do you
dies,
think that
and
actor is? That
Spoiler alert! Sorry, we gotta go back and
Sorry, all the
in case someone hasn't seen Top Gun.
Yeah.
Goose dies in a scene that still makes me cry.
Okay, Daniel, you didn't have to tell us that.
Yeah, terrifying sex scene too.
Okay, well, yeah.
Have you seen Top Gun, Jared?
Yeah, of course.
I mean, like anyone, like it's two bodies silhouetted, and then a tongue snakes out of
Tom Cruise's mouth.
of both of their mouths at the same time, as if they're inhabited by some sort of demon.
Yeah, it's like Lady in the Tramp.
Yeah,
like,
and then the tongues meet silhouetted against like a blue-black night sky or window, and it's just these two tongues,
Yeah,
and there's
and
so much space between the tongue and the roof of their mouths.
Yeah, and they're playing
Take My
that
Breath
"Take
Away.
My Take My
Yeah.
Breath Away" song
Yeah.
by
Take my
Birnbaum.
breath away. Yeah, it's fucking classic.
Yeah, great soundtrack by the
Oh,
way.
it is a great soundtrack.
The only way that would have been better is if they played "Dying in Your Arms Tonight."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. At some point, not necessarily that scene, but
Yeah.
But
Okay, so all right, so at this point, I'm gonna inject some moral seriousness into this discussion.
that's what.
Once we let George speak,
we needed
some-
Jared to corral us back from space.
And so because this was already imagined by Wallace. I mean, this is the whole premise of Infinite Jest. Imagine something that's so entertaining that you don't want to do anything else, right? Mm-hmm. Imagine like the perfect piece of entertainment that just like renders you inert and useless, right?
And dead.
And
literally in that book, yeah. I mean, but that's and like Idiocracy too, like that movie. That's basically the end game. Is just we all just sit. Even Tom Segura. Have you guys heard of Tom Segura, stand-up comedian? Yeah. Like his latest stand-up, or like one of his ones. He talks about how like the dream is just to never leave his recliner,
Yeah.
just like everything, like Amazon doesn't just deliver. It just like literally like you have a chute where it just like hurdles through and you have your fucking like meal or whatever, But I mean, honestly, I mean that really is like, that really could be like one of the end games, except for like, when you get virtual reality and stuff, there might be just these big rooms that we walk around in like fucking idiots, but we have the goggles on or whatever.
Yeah.
But I mean, how good?
I don't know.
Are
what
you going to pose a question, Jared, or you're just mentioning that?
Yeah.
No, well, okay. So what I'm working towards is this. So, building, writing a novel or making a movie is not like constructing a Big Mac or like creating a recipe for Coke. Like when Coke designs their recipes, they measure that shit down to like the nanometer. Mm-hmm. There are like minute variations between different recipes, and they do this kind of stuff for market research. They'll lay like 25 cans of Coke out on the table and have people test them all. And if for some reason people say that they enjoyed like number 18 the most, they will use that recipe. And the difference between all the cans is like negligible. Like it's so small.
Yeah, which always amazed me.
But they got like electrodes hooked up to their head, and like something's firing in their brain that like means that is the most pleasurable recipe. Mm-hmm. And so, so can you, but creating art is not like that. And we all know that Coke tastes great. We all know that a Big Mac is great, but we know that it doesn't make us feel good. It doesn't nourish us, although it is wildly enjoyable.
Right.
And so the question that I'm really asking is it's going to sound kind of controversial, but is the purpose of art really to be as entertaining as possible?
Yeah.
Is the purpose of art to deliver maximum pleasure, or is there something more to it?
Well, this is my very basic, shoot off the hip answer is that I do think one of the reasons I do really champion contemporary literature is because I do think it has done a really good job in a lot of cases at a higher rate than in the past of combining entertainment and substance. Mm-hmm. And those are my favorite books. I mean, like Infinite Jest is a perfect example of that. Cloud Atlas, maybe my favorite book, another great example of that. Again, that caters to my biases though, because like Cloud Atlas is not easy to everyone. Infinite Jest is not easy to everyone. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, that's my real basic.
Yeah, well, and then it calls into question to me the culture of consumption that we're living in, where I think as a society I don't think it's controversial to say that as a society we value enjoyment over substance or entertainment over
gratification.
Yeah. Immediate gratification above all else. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's just you won't see. Part of this is like no one, I mean, you could technically have the time, but as a generalization, no one has the time anymore the way they did when fucking Swann's Way came out to sit with Proust for a long fucking time.
Which is also a product of technology.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. You know?
And so, I mean, the culture we live in changes the way we consume art. And it's hard to argue whether or not I am so jaded about it that I don't really care if this is a positive or negative thing. I think it's just the way it is. And yeah, I just don't.
Yeah, but as much as you love Top Gun though, Devin,
sure.
Like that's not all you need, right? Mm-hmm. That doesn't fill you up.
Yeah. I think what's interesting is I sense in me a need every once in a while to sit with what someone might call a hard book to read. Mm-hmm. And that's also because but also that gives me pleasure. So that's my bias. But like every once in a while, I know like this summer, I want to read Moby Dick because I just want to sit with a book for a long fucking time. I also know that reading Moby Dick will give me vast amounts of pleasure, even though it takes a great.
Yeah. Well, George loves Moby Dick.
Oh yeah.
So George, maybe you should jump in on that.
For me, and Moby Dick falls into this category. Like I enjoy being entertained. I really do. But I think what I like more, what I enjoy more, what I find more, as Jared said, nourishment from is something that puzzles me. Like I want something that I have to think about, because no, you don't like to sit and things like that can be enjoyable as well. I can think of several films over the last few years that do exactly that. Not the least of which was The Lobster. What's that director's name, Jared?
Yeah,
he does fantastic stuff.
Oh, he's a Greek director. I can't remember his last name.
We watched that a few years ago.
Yeah, he just did. I'm looking it up now.
I haven't seen
The
it.
Favorite.
He did The Favorite, which I haven't seen yet. Yeah,
I like something that baffles me. I like something that's new enough to inspire consideration long after you're through reading it or watching it. And that's I find that, again, as Jared said, nourishing. Something you have to sit with, something that you don't just comprehend at face value as you can do with so much, of the popular media.
Yeah, I think one of the dangers of contemporary culture and the way in which we ingest information is it becomes harder and harder. And I see this when I teach too, when I teach students who grew up with this form of mass media. It becomes harder and harder to instill the intrinsic importance of having intellectual curiosity, mm-hmm. of learning for learning's sake, of thinking for thinking's sake, of finding pleasure in, as you say, George, like being puzzled by something. And I think that to me, and this is mostly coming from a teacher's point of view, is one of the biggest losses. And I think that is a loss. I think even though information is readily accessible now, some things are worth working for. And that's a difficult agenda to push now, because people don't want to hear that. And people say it's old school or whatever, it's archaic. But I think it's really important, especially when you're young, to learn the value of sitting with something you're puzzled by and figuring it out on your own, or not figuring it out, coming to a place where you don't figure out, but then realizing, oh, the attempting was the pleasure. And I worry about that. People read, people do only read headlines now, and they don't sit with things, and they don't read the whole article, and they don't blah, blah, blah. And I'm sounding like it makes me feel like I'm sounding like a 60-year-old man, but really I'm sounding like a 27-year-old person who's had an education that showed me the value of that, and I don't see it. I don't see it anymore.
Just real quick, that makes me think of what Emerson would think of today's culture, just because, that's basically self-reliance,
Yeah.
But anyway,
so Emerson would have made a great tweeter.
Yeah.
Like he would have.
Yeah, he would have.
So would Thoreau. Imitation is suicide. Fucking viral tweet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, as would Oscar Wilde, he would have.
Oh my God, he would have. Yeah, he would have been the tweet master general, man.
Yeah, he was the original tweeter.
Seriously. Oh fuck. Yeah, we really missed that.
Well, regarding what you were saying, Devin, that's where a book like Infinite Jest is actually quite wise and quite profound, because Wallace, when he was writing it, had to try and somehow manage the irony that he was writing about a culture that was obsessed with entertainment and maximum pleasure, while also trying to make the book pleasurable, but not so pleasurable that it was succumbing to the very thing he was trying to describe, right? And so he tried to write a novel that pushed on people a little bit. And, we're all writers here. We all have friends who are writers, and we all know how much people complain about Infinite Jest and how few people have actually read it. And it seems like maybe in that regard, the book was kind of a failure. And fun fact, actually, the original subtitle for Infinite Jest was A Failed Entertainment. But Michael Peach made him remove it. But that was sort of Wallace's intention, was that maybe the concept of making something that pleasurable is in itself kind of like it's asking for too much. You know, it's doomed to failure in that sense.
That's interesting.
That is very interesting. But yeah, just one more comment about kind of just, difficulty and how important it is in our lives. I think the biggest danger in our culture is just a lack of exposure now to difficulty. And I do mean in a literary, like in terms of literature, literacy is just a problem now compared to in the past, despite the enormous access we have to language, more than ever. And it's so ironic to me. And being exposed to language and being able to suss out language and becoming better with language only begets a deeper interest. And the more distant we are from it, the less we're going to care about it. And that's kind of scary. I don't know the remedy for that. I don't know. I mean, especially in a world where binary is becoming pretty important. And in a world,
it's gonna render us more and more passive.
Yeah. And I mean, and I don't know what that means. Like, and when I say binary, I also mean like literally like, what we're doing digitally is becoming more important. And I don't know how that's going to affect language in the future, especially when we start to be able to read exactly what's going on in our minds more and more. That's another scary feature for art, especially writing. Direct access to minds is going to take the mask off, and it's going to take the drama away a lot. That's actually something else I did want to talk about. I mean, just because big data is going to take away a lot of our choices, and without choice, there's no drama, and without drama, there's no story. So I don't know. That's probably not in the near future, but it is. If we're talking about people sitting on their recliners and having things brought to them, entertainment, nourishment, whatever, money, whatever you need. I mean, the drama's gone, But I don't know. Infinite pleasure, maybe that's better. I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like we should go around again and in one word describe what we feel about the future.
Oh, one word.
One word.
God damn it.
True writerly fashion.
Yeah. We'll close with this. Okay. Let's meditate.
Are we going to meditate? It's cool. We call this a turn and talk. But we're not talking. We're just gathering our thoughts.
Dear baby. No. This is hard, man.
It's one word.
Everything's going to feel so...
It's one word. It's not going to be right.
All right, then go first. You go first.
I went first last time.
God damn it. All right, George, you go first.
Pass. Come back to me.
I like that. I actually
can be.
Can that be your word?
No, George needs a word. I like that as a word,
Pass.
but George gets another word.
I
George
think
gets
it's pretty
two,
great.
George gets 2 words.
No, why don't we?
Why doesn't our producer? Why doesn't
I mean-
our producer begin by writing a word on the? On the why don't we can say
Our producer is making gestures of eschewal. Here she goes. Community is
Wow.
her word. Yes,
Optimism there.
That's very optimistic.
Yeah.
I'm very concerned about community when it comes to the future. Okay.
Okay. Well, I can't reduce it to one word, but I'll kind of encapsulate.
Nah, it's got to be.
I think what I've said this whole.
It's got to be one word. It's got to be one word.
I can't do it, Dan. Sorry. Well, I'll just say, try to encapsulate sort of what I've been thinking this whole time, what I've been thinking these past couple of days as my closing statement, which is that, you know, the question of what kind of art is good for the soul is an age-old question. It goes all the way back to, you know, Socrates arguing with Thucydides about poetry, and, you know, Plato famously believed that poetry was kind of a corrupt form because it relied on artifice to instruct, whereas like philosophy was more pure because it was a direct delivery system, right? Which is of course ridiculous. But
Yeah.
if we can imagine a future in which we are, you know, passive consumers of perfectly constructed pieces of entertainment, which are marketed directly to us and are not challenging to us at all, and simply gratify like that part of our brain that just like wants the Big Mac, you know, that to me will mean a certain loss of humanity, because it will mean a certain loss of freedom, both in the creation of art and in the reception of art. And I think that puts the whole question of like negotiable meaning, communal meaning, and the commerce between the audience and the artist into question. And I just don't like the idea of that. I mean, I'm like a chronic worrier when it comes about this kind of stuff, especially technology. But living in that kind of world where everything is just like, you know, automatically generated for us based on algorithms is going to mean a loss of humanity in more ways than one. But that will be a very deep one indeed.
So worried.
Anxiety.
Is
anxiety.
your one word.
I was also going to say for him, I'll use this as my word.
Angst.
Angst. I'll use it as my word, but a part of what you're saying is basically, and everyone can look this up now, but meretricious, I think, is the word I'll say. I think that defines a lot of our art, a lot of our mainstream art. I think it kind of always has. Yeah. No. That's my word. That's my word.
Okay.
I'm going for it.
My word's just terrified.
Terrified. Yeah.
Terrified.
Anxiety was going to be my other word.
I'm torn between.
But that's just me.
I was torn between reactionary and terrified, but I don't even think we'll be reactionary. I think we'll be too complacent.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think we'll even have the power.
I would love to be reactionary.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm terrified. The loss of ennui is terrifying too. The fact that our dailiness of life will be corrupted.
Ennui has been replaced by anxiety and fear.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Ennui is yeah.
Okay.
And George's pass.
Well, boredom, Devin, boredom is just terror spread thin.
Oh. Is that like Camus or something?
No, that's me.
Oh,
man.
wow.
Sorry.
Tweet that, man. Get that out there. Get
that-
viral.
yeah. I'm going to steal it. I'm putting it on there.
Viral too is a good word for the future as well.
Viral is good. Yeah.
The idea that there's an infection.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Okay. All right, guys. We're gonna fucking stop now.
Okay, that's it for today's episode. If you like what you heard, please subscribe and review on whichever platform you're listening. You can get in touch with us on Twitter at Animal Riot Press, or Facebook and Instagram under the same name, or through our website, animalriotpress.com. This has been the 10th episode of the Animal Riot podcast with your host, Brian Birnbaum, and featuring Devin Kelly, George Sawaya, and Jared Pollen. Transcripts for our deaf and hard of hearing animals are provided by Jonathan Kay, and we are produced by me, Katie Rainey. See you later, you filthy animals.
Hashtag Total Recall 2. Together we can do this.
Good shit. It's the burn, bombing on y'all and getting gully as the fern. I don't know much about